How do you grow out big bonsai trunks? What do you do in winter? How do you maintain a grow bed for bonsai? In this video. It is cold. It is the last few days of December. Everything's frozen over overnight. But still, I'm going to go out to my grow bed. I'm going to do some winter care. The soil is not frozen through, so I think we will be okay. Let's get into the car. Let's drive over to my grower's field and I'll show you what I do in the middle of winter to take care of the trees that I'm growing out. And there we are. We were here, of course, a couple of months ago and I did some light pruning. Now I'm going to just move stuff around, thin out my plants, prune them back. If you have a growing field, do you know why you have a growing field? For me, I have a growing field for 4 things. First of all, a gorgeous Nebari. That is why every 2 to 3 years I lift every single tree and I prune back the overly heavy roots and then I plant back up. Then you want thickness. You want the tree to fatten up a lot. In the ground that goes very quickly, so ground growing is ideal for creating thickness. Then there is the trunk line. You want movement, you want changes in direction. Therefore, every 2 years you have to prune. And that's also for the third T, taper. What you're after in a good bonsai is a trunk that gets thinner and thinner as you go from the base, from the Nebari, up all the way into the tip of the crown. So if you then have a linden tree like this one, here you see very nice movement going up. And then this is straight, but nice taper because it has been pruned once, twice, and this is 30 years worth of growing. However, the tree has decided that this branch is actually much stronger than that branch. So what do we do? Now the answer is quite simple. You basically follow the recommendations of the tree. There's no need, if you're growing in the ground, to be cleverer than the tree. Because in the end, the tree is going to grow what it wants to grow. And if there's such a clear sign here that this is the new trunk line, just remove everything that we've built up. Use the natural movement of the trunk line and just aid a little bit in healing of the wound, cleaning up the big cut. This way you get more interesting trunks because you didn't think of the curve. The tree made the curve for you. And the taper, oh well, it will come back. It is in the ground after all. Just a quick snip to get this off because it is an awkward angle. This is nice positioned. This shades a little bit, but aids in creating a better base. And this, yeah, I can leave it on as well for now. Now this field, as I said, is 2, 3, 4, 5 years old worth of seedlings. Now there's a field there that I just pruned and they are about 10, 15 years in the ground. Then there are yews that I've been working on. They are in the ground now 30 years, 40 years. I have them for 5 years here. I only have 2 of them at home styled. I broke my spade in this video and I'm quite annoyed, so I couldn't transplant all of these, but I did prune them back and told you a little bit about what it looks like. Anyway, let's dive into it. How do you grow bonsai trunks in the full ground? What do you do in winter? These yews have been in this place for about 4 years, so it is really time to lift them and move them around to avoid the roots getting too heavy. Now I hope that this will go quite easily, but I'm not sure. This really needs to be done every few years, otherwise you get really heavy roots that you can never use. It becomes difficult to replant them, and when you want to get them into a pot, you spend years fixing the root ball. Now because it has been such a long time, I'm going to lift them completely, but normally just cutting a circle like this every second year should be plenty. And this is pretty much all that I need to do at this time. Just toss it back in, all done. Wow. This is a first in, I'd say, 30 years. I had this for 30 years and it just broke straight through. Didn't expect that one to happen. Guess no more digging this visit. I grew this from an acorn and I just didn't pay attention. You see there's a big chop here. Well, actually you don't see it. There is a big chop here, but I should have cut way more frequently. This is really, really ugly. I think I'm just going to go back to this branch. So I'm going to chop it all the way down here. And then I'm just going to prune this big branch back and start all over. And then in springtime, once it starts growing, I might have to just lift it, move it and work on the roots. This is really not a pretty tree. If it does grow back properly, I do have a fairly nice base here, just not much else. Suppose this can also go then old Chinese junipers that I grew from seed.
Let's see, maybe some lower branches will regrow.
These are all Elms or Trident-maple and all of them very good backbedders. And all of them too close to each other. Now I don't have a spade, but I do have my big loppers. So let's try that again, shall we? Now these are all on the young side. And I'll show you other trees that have been growing in this field much longer, so you can see what it looks like after doing this for a couple of years in a row, every year just extending the height a little bit. And in a couple of weeks I'll come back with my spade, I'll lift them and I'll do some root work on these, and then I can also do the fine pruning. But for now at least I've reduced them and I've triggered the tree into starting buds lower on this trunk. This I'm not sure, it has been cut down here. So there is a very decent base, some okay roots, but it needs some root work. I'll leave it for now. This way I need to go through this whole field, prune everything back. Frequent cutting back is really key to developing nice taper on your trunks. And doing this every 2 years or so means that you get fairly small scars. Now here we have another one of those trunks that have gotten out of the way. I pruned it here and side branches have developed all along the trunk and there's a big leader. Now it is quite tempting to go all the way down here and cut it off, but I think the taper can still be saved. So I'm removing this lower one, I'm removing the big back one, I'm making this one short and I'm removing this small one. And now with my concave pruners, let me try and clean up this trunk a little bit. This way I check every single trunk individually and decide for a route forward and hope that something nice comes out. You can't precisely predict what a tree is going to do in the next season, so you always have to look for optimal trunk lines. Remove mistakes, remove things that you don't like, and over the course of a few years the tree might show beauty, which of course leaves me with pruning. Now this is a kojo I've been growing out for a long time, and here I'm just going to take out all these long vertical whips to avoid creating side trunks. There's plenty of these whips in here. And I'm going to go, this tree has the nasty habits of just throwing whips everywhere on the trunk. I'm also going to remove those unless I want them. And if I want them, I'm just going to leave one and remove every second one. Now over summer I cut back to here, but this side branch looks like it is a lot better suited. So now I'm just going to take a concave cutter, because otherwise I can't get to it, and gently tease away this stump and side branch, that way facilitating this branch. And now this is ready for the rest of the season, and this should not die back all that much. Even if it does, it will grow over very quickly once this branch starts extending in spring. And I'm really a little bit annoyed with my spade breaking down. This is a beech standing way too close to this prunus, and I want to move it, but I'm not sure whether I actually have the leverage. So, I mean, pushing it in is still working. Just to show, this is the sort of root spread that I'm creating on these. It does take a bit of time, but time is free, just a matter of waiting. Now if you lift them, it's always good to straight away remove any of these vertical roots. If you look closely, you can see here all the mycorrhiza, the white dots, all these fungal spores on and around the roots. Really, really healthy, this beech. There are some branches here in an inner curve. I removed those. This is nice. It is an outward curve, but it's quite heavy, so I'm reducing these branches. Here I don't really need a branch. That goes. Here there's a whole cluster of side branches. I don't want it. Now this is interesting because here I have a curve. I really want to keep the curve, so I'm going to remove the top one of these two and a little side branch that sits here. Now here is an old cut mark that I'm also going to clean up a little bit to help healing over. Not too deep. Then here I want to keep the side branch that sits at the connection. Everything else can go. Here in the inner curve, this can also go. This is the sort of pruning that I want to do on trees like this. Eventually this will probably become my front, so you don't see the big cuts. So let's give this a new space. A little bit further away from the prunus. Taking the weeds out as I go. Create a nice flat growing area. Take the plant, point the branch outwards, plant it on, make sure the roots are all in nice contact with the substrate, and cover the roots again with substrate. Now this is a very, very nice big old field maple, but the main thing you can tell here is all these suckers that have come up from the main roots. These all need to go. Normally I'd lift the whole tree and remove them right at the tree or at the roots, but yeah, with a broken spade that's not all that realistic to do. Then I need to check for the main trunk line. I just keep these side branches small because this tree is getting ready for a pot and therefore slower development is good. Now this is nice, but now I've added movement to the main trunk. I'm not going to let that grow out strongly. Remove that as well. All of that is gone. Here a little side branch that can go, and now I just have a trunk line with the basis of the primary branch, and this also. So this I do for all trees every other year or so. I prune them back all the way like this, and I lift them to look at the roots. This is basically what you get when you pull these out of the ground. These are the sort of branches that I've been cutting off and that I really don't want to keep. So they go completely. This is all from previous years when it was covered with soil and I couldn't get to it. So this is a nice time to actually clean this out. Here is another one of these branches that have just popped on the root. Removing it fully. Hopefully it doesn't come back next year. And as said, this is one trunk that is ready almost for a pot. The shape is there, however the roots are still a mess, so I'm now just going to remove everything that grows down very far. Same here. This way it gets ready for a pot maybe next year. Mind you, don't use good clippers for this. This really is rough work and it's not so good for your tools. Which is also why I don't use normal bonsai tools. I use garden shears, which are a bit rougher, less delicate. Right. Now I know this looks like there's not very much left, but that is on purpose. What is now going to happen is that all along this base there's going to be new roots popping out over the next season. So that next time in the year when I want to lift it, there's lots and lots of fine roots all around the trunk line. Now all I've got to do is clear the space out again and plant it back up. And there you have it. This first row is done. This big linden tree has a cut mark here, which I'm not going to reduce now, because this first needs to get very strong hold. So once I've got a meter or so on here over summer, I'm going to take a saw and cut it flush here. But I don't want any dieback because there's an old cut here, there's an old cut here. If I now make a cut here, there is a risk of this trunk dying back. Then, if you don't clean up your cut marks, in the end you just have big cuts and it doesn't look pretty. Now, when I did my previous video, people asked me, what do you do with everything that you cut off? There's a small compost just behind the camera, but most of the time what I just do, I just cut these branches in little pieces as I go, and I just toss them in between the plants. They'll decay over time, adding as a sort of a compost and fertilizing the trees. It is after all just all green waste, and as long as you don't need to be in between here, that's just fine. Of course you don't do this with species that don't back cut. Elms, maples, no worries. Pines, more difficult. Chinese junipers, more difficult. But all evergreen deciduous should deal with this without a hiccup. Now this is an interesting one. You can see here a small pruning scar that led to a slight gentle movement to me. Then that was 2 years ago. Then last year I pruned it again here, resulting in this branch, that branch and these two top branches and a lot of thin branches that I've already removed. Now the question is, of course, what am I going to do? Am I going to cut this one off? Am I going to cut that one off? Or am I going to go lower? Now if you don't know what to do, lower is 9 out of 10 times the better solution. The lower you cut, the more taper you get. It is a little bit of a shame. I should have done that already last year, because I know elms backbud a lot. So I'm now going to just cut this off. I'm going to do it a little bit of slant, because it is in the ground, and therefore it will grow very fast. If I do it in a pot, I make a horizontal cut, and I clean it up later on. Oh, and now I need to do it and pay attention. I've made a fairly deep cut, but that's good. That will aid in healing over later on. There we go. So that's the start of the new trunk line already in place. This will start shooting. This will heal over 2-3 years, and maybe later this year I'll come back and I'll clean this out further if it starts to grow. Always go low. These are larches that I've been growing out, but at the base this is very boring. So I'm just going to remove the top and I'll just leave a few branches. And in fact I'm going to thin those out, and this way I'll get a very short base with a lot of movement in the upper branch and hopefully create a better tree. Again, I have time. This is just for growing taper and movement, and nothing needs to happen quick here. Some of the other ones I'm leaving longer, like this one. And here I'm just pruning the whole thing back into profile to make sure that branches stay alive. Again, very non-discriminatory. I don't need to look closely at this time because I'm just thinning out, preparing for the next season. Here they're actually very close to each other, and in spring I'll need to move a few. But yeah, with the current spade situation that's a little bit difficult. So there is a lot of work involved in growing trunks from scratch in the ground. It goes a lot quicker than in a pot, but the result is also potentially a lot coarser than what you grow in a pot. So you spend another decade after you dig these up and you've not done the proper work repairing all the corrections. So it still takes 15-20 years from a seedling into a reasonable bonsai in a pot. But that being said, it is lots of fun. So if you have a bit of land, you have a bit of space in your garden and you can plant them out, let's do that. Now the weather is really not nice. It is cold, it is wet. I'm done here for today. I've just spent about 4 hours, and that's this video, cleaning out all these grow beds. And before it gets really dark, I think I'm just going to finish off, go home and edit this video together. This was Jelle, growing bonsai, and I recommend you just keep doing that. See you in the new year. Bye bye.